So this evening we have a 2012 Chevrolet Equinox with a 2.4 liter LEA engine, and it has a coolant leak. Let's get a light up here, and the coolant is leaking from the water pump, the back of the water pump area. Customer complained that it was blowing poor heat out of the heater and the cooling system was low, so you can see evidence of coolant at the back of the water pump there. General Motors is so proud of this water pump, they actually built the entire vehicle around it. Now to change that water pump, driven by the balance shaft chain, which had a tendency to break. I think by this year, this 2012, they had corrected that issue, but the 2010s and 11s were prone to failure, and there was a policy adjustment on the balance shaft, if I recall. I don't think it applies to the 12s. But according to the service literature, you got to drop the exhaust, remove the catalytic converter, remove the front differential. Wow. Obviously take off that plate up there with the 4 bolts where the drive is, and put this service tool in there to hold the water pump drive chain in place attached to the front cover while you remove the bolts that drive it. If you take that off without doing it, then you're pulling the entire engine to pull the front cover off so you can retime the balance shaft. If you're going in that far, you might as well do the timing chains and guides while you're in there. This is just freaking nasty. There's like no room up here to work in here. Wow. Well, let's see what's involved. See, this has got a engine heater in it as well. So we'll look at what's involved in doing this job. So here's the procedure according to General Motors. Remove the air cleaner assembly. Remove the intake manifold cover, remove the coolant heater, remove the catalytic converter. But see, there's a link to removing the catalytic converter. So let's click that link. And it's an LEA all-wheel drive catalytic converter. So there it is there. What's underneath the catalytic converter? And remove the exhaust manifold. Remove the exhaust manifold, really? Well, I wonder if we remove the exhaust manifold from the back of the engine, if we're going to have enough room to work from the top down rather than from the bottom up. Yeah. I don't think you have to remove the converter, just unbolt it and drop it. Let's have a look at the top of this engine and see how much room there is. So remove the access cover from the front cover on the engine. Looks like it has a gasket in there, but a little RTV sealer will probably be good. And have a look in there and try and turn that water pump. You can turn that water pump and the chain is busted. I can't turn it. I can see the chain. It's very difficult to see, but you can see it. It's there inside that hole. So, it hasn't got a broken chain. Darn. I was looking so forward to dropping the whole engine. You can see the water pump dripping there while I'm talking. So I ran ahead and removed the upper engine cover, the air induction, the air filter housing. It's pretty straightforward. I thought there'd be more room if I took the windshield wiper cowl off. I gained maybe a ½ inch here. That's about it, because the plastic cover sticks down a little bit further here. Didn't really gain a lot. You can see a little bit of access to that water pump access hole in the front cover where we're going to put that holding fixture. But basically you have to remove this bracket, the exhaust heat shield, the exhaust manifold. Wow. Well, I'm going to order up some parts. I know I'm going to need some gaskets for the exhaust. I'm going to need a water pump, obviously, and see what else is involved in this job. So remove that support for the air induction system bolted to the back of the head. Disconnect the 2 plastic clips from it. Remove the oxygen sensor, and then the shield bolts. In my case, I only had to take out 2 because one's rusted through. And hopefully we can fish this shield out of here and then get at the exhaust manifold bolts from below. So remove the 3 15mm nuts on the down pipe going from the going into the catalytic converter, and 10 13mm nuts that hold the manifold to the head studs. Hopefully the manifold is loose in there, but I think I'm going to have to drop the back pipe, the bottom pipe, the catalytic converter, to get it out because of the 2 studs on the back of the excuse me, on the downward pipe of the manifold. Won't allow it to go back. It has to come up first, and it can't come up because of the studs on the head. So I'll see what I can do here. So here's a look underneath the vehicle. That bolt has to be removed because it's bolted to a bracket and it's holding up the catalyst, and then this rubber hanger has to be released, and hopefully it'll drop far enough. Doesn't look like it might. Yeah, it might drop far enough to, only has to come down about 3/4 of an inch, so we'll give that a try. That bolt might not come out of there though. It looks pretty rusty. Well, heating the nut on the back of the bracket helped, and then using one of these reverse sockets, you reverse these bolt easy outs to grab it. It used to be 15, but now it's like 14.5 or 14. And undoing this hanger here, it's allowed it to drop about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. Hopefully that's enough to wiggle the manifold out of there now. We'll see from the top. Well, unfortunately it still won't come out. It hits the stud. If I could remove this one stud here, the other stud came out with the actual nut, which was fortunate. But if I remove this one stud, if I can get a stud remover in there and remove it, maybe heat this ear up a little bit first, then the manifold will slide straight back. If I lift it up, it binds on the studs on the head. So I'm going to try removing that stud. So it still won't come out of there. It seems like it's hitting something, and I wondered why the service literature said remove the block heater if it had one. It seemed like that block heater, which is right here, is down under the manifold, but if you look, the block heater goes over top of the bottom ear of the manifold. So I can't get it off without removing that block heater. And there's 2 frickin' Houdini bolts underneath there. There's one. Maybe there's only one. I hope there's only one. Wow. Engineering at its finest. You guys in the States won't have this issue because you won't have a block heater. So there's a 10mm bolt on it. That's where it lives, down underneath there. So I got it underneath the manifold. I'm going to try just loosening it off and see if I can leave it partially in there, because I can see that that's going to be a challenge to put back in. I hope there's only one fastener on it. I can only see one, but chances are there's 2. So don't remove the block heater completely. Just loosen it off about 3/8 of an inch, and you can move it out enough for this bottom ear. Let's see, it'd be this ear right here to clear, because the block heater kind of covers that bottom ear slightly. Well, there's the manifold out. Now for the water pump. So there are 2 6mm bolts that you can get at to hold the thermostat housing cover onto the thermostat housing. You need a long 1/4 inch drive universal joint. And then the coolant temp sensor lives behind a heat shield down there. And that has to be removed because there are 3 6mm bolts that hold the coolant pipe to the back of the block, and one of them is behind the coolant temp sensor. So you need a thin wall 19mm or 3/4 inch deep socket to get that coolant temp sensor out. So there's the thermostat housing, the lower housing, and these are where the 3 bolts are. The coolant temp sensor lives right here, and it sticks out like that, so you can't get at this bolt because engineers at its finest. This gasket, and of course the O-ring on the thermostat. I'm going to change the thermostat because we're here. Crazy not to. And I don't believe this gasket comes with the water pump, which is stupid because you need this square O-ring And this gasket, I would never go to all the work of putting this in there and take a chance on reusing these seals. So now that's out of the way. These are the heater hoses, by the way. We can proceed to install the holding fixture on the balance shaft chain that drives the water pump, because if you loosen off the 3 bolts and drop the balance shaft chain in there, it is going to be a bad day. It'll require disassembly of the complete front of the engine to reinstall that. So that fixture holds the balance shaft chain and gear that drives the water pump. So there's the new water pump, part number 43529 from Napa, and it actually comes with the balance shaft gear, the water pump drive gear. So this has got like a little bicycle chain that runs off the crank sprocket to run the water pump. So this tool sits in here like so and retains that gear with the cover bolts on the front cover so that that gear doesn't fall down, and then you can remove these 3 nuts or 3 bolts. So this gear actually has to come off of this pump. We'll use the new bolts. As I said, it comes with a new gasket here, but it doesn't come with an O-ring seal that goes in the back here. Now, one other note, this is the bottom of the water pump. There's a drain plug on it. I didn't have to drain it because there's no coolant in this thing. There is a bolt that goes through from the timing cover on the outside. So let's remove that bolt first while there's more room, and put that one in last. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So that's that bolt I was mentioning. Now some guys take the motor mount out to support the engine. To give it a little bit more room if you take this motor mount out and support the engine. I'm going to try and do it without. That's the bolt down there that I was mentioning. It goes in through the front cover and into the water pump in the back. So if you try to take the water pump out without removing that, it's not coming out. Although I haven't drained the coolant out of this thing, and I've taken the thermostat housing and that connector tube out, and no coolant has run out, but it just dawned on me, why would GM put this drain plug here? And that's because they want you to drain this before you loosen off this flange, because if you don't, coolant might run right into the timing cover and into the crankcase. So I'm going to remove that plug on this thing and drain it in case there's any coolant in it. Got to get at that from the bottom though. So I took that plug out, 1/4 inch drive universal, 13 mil, and it drained out like half a cup. You can see where that is. It's in a nasty spot, and worse because this is all-wheel drive and it has this differential in the front here, and the axle shaft going off to the side here. So I guess it would have the axle shaft either way, but nevertheless it's kind of a challenge to get at that drain plug. There it is. I might be able to get at some of the fastener bolts from down here on this through the wheel well, so maybe I'll take the wheel off, might make a little bit more room. So there's the holding tool installed. You can actually get up here through beside the axle shaft, fairly convenient. Now I got to take out the 3 fasteners that hold the drive gear through this hole. Now the nice thing about this tool is nothing can fall inside the engine with it. So 10 mil deep socket probably, we'll see. So I've got the 3 drive bolts out of the drive pulley. Turns out there's another 6 mil bolt pulling in from the front and 2 8 mil bolts from the back, from what I can see. So I'm removing the other front 6 mil bolt. So I took all the bolts out. There's only 4 bolts that hold the water pump in, and it wouldn't move, so I thought I must have missed something. Sure enough, this is the bolt that goes through from the top. The one underneath it is just a timing cover bolt. I should have realized that because it was short. The ones that go through the water pump got to be like 4.5 inches, 5 inches long. So now the water pump is out. So there's the original water pump, and there's the new one. I've taken the drive pulley off. Now you have no way to turn this drive pulley or drive gear once the pump is installed, so I'm going to try to time it by looking at where this one is. It's just past that ear, and I'm going to turn that to just the same spot, and hopefully it'll be close enough to get the bolts from the outside started. Going to reuse the new bolts that came with the pump with a little Loctite on it. Put the silicone seal in here with some silicone grease on it, and wipe up the surface at the back of the timing cover to make sure it's clean. So I changed my mind. Instead of just trying to wing it, I decided I would make a little lining stud and put it in the bottom bolt here. I'm still going to start out with it close. I've put silicone grease on the gasket here, but this should align it, and then I'll just thread it out. I ground a hex on the end of it for a small socket. Well, that alignment dowel worked fantastic. Note to self, I just got to shorten it a little bit for next time, because it doesn't need to be quite that long. But regardless, this water pump is back installed. I got to put the drive pulley bolts in. The fasteners in the front are tight. Yeah, let's continue. So you need to put the bolts in that front pulley without dropping them. So here's a little trick that I've used over the years. Take a piece of paper and stuff it into the bolt into the socket with a piece of paper around it. Now it won't fall out as you're trying to put it in there, and just make sure you get the paper out when you go to pull the socket off. So there's what I'm using to tighten it. Long handled, flex headed 1/4 inch drive snap-on socket or ratchet, and semi-deep socket, and a little thumb wheel just adds the perfect length. A deep socket would also work. I just find that knurled thumb wheel handy for starting the bolts. So the water pump drive bolts are installed. Time to remove that little bracket and put the cover plate back on the front. So here's the water pump mounting kit. This probably comes with a water pump gasket, but it comes with the O-ring that we need on that pipe and the thermostat housing square O-ring. And it should come with the cover gasket too. Let's have a look. So this is the big O-ring that goes on the outlet of the water pump, and I think this is the, is that a thermostat? That's a thermostat gasket. That might be the housing seal. And these, of course, are water pump installation gaskets. This kit covers a couple of different varieties of engines, so that's why there's a couple of extra gaskets. Now, considering you have to disturb this O-ring to change a water pump, why isn't that in the water pump kit? And this one as well, and this cover gasket as well, because you can't get at it without doing that. Oh well. So that round O-ring is the one that goes in there. And there's actually another O-ring in this end, but I didn't disturb it, so I'm not going to touch that one. I'm just going to change this one out here. Put some silicone grease on those O-rings, and we'll put the thermostat in. We got a new thermostat for it. And it comes with a gasket on it. There's a 398-180. So we'll go ahead and install this assembly now. Well, there's the back pipe thermostat housing installed back there. Focus. And the 3 bolts at that end. Coolant temp sensor reinstalled with some Teflon sealant on the threads. Heater hoses reinstalled. And thermostat installed. Thermostat housing installed. Hard to get at those little bolts down there, but they're in. So there's the exhaust manifold gasket for this application. I wouldn't want to take a chance on reusing the original gasket because the manifold's off now. Well, we've cleaned up the cylinder head surface at the back, put this gasket on the studs, put some never sees on the studs, and then reinstall the manifold. So there's the manifold prepped, gasket surface cleaned. I still have to change this ring gasket on the catalytic converter. Now be sure to install this bolt in the block heater and leave it loose like that, because the manifold will slip in behind here, and then it's much easier. Otherwise it's a pain in the ass to reach in over top of everything. I did have the catalytic converter plugged with a plastic cap, but I've taken it out now because I'm ready to drop the manifold in. So there it is, back together and running again. Just filling the cooling system. I got to clear some codes because I had the key on with the mass airflow sensor unplugged. So we'll see how it runs.